Hey everyone, thanks for joining. This is Learnin Stuff with Becky with your host, Aunt Becky. And today I have a couple guests with me who I'm so excited to have.
Hi, I'm Laura. I'm 32. My preferred pronouns are her, she.
Hi, my name's Leah. I'm 19. My pronouns are she, her.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm so excited. And for our listeners at home, this is a safe space for anybody to ask questions, get some knowledge. You know, sometimes we don't have a safe person in our life to ask those questions to. So I'm your Aunt Becky now, and I am here to answer those questions for you. And I will say, so if you watch our podcast, Not Your Mother's Sex Ed, those are semi-scripted. We do a lot of research beforehand. These episodes are completely unscripted, so I have no idea what questions they're going to be asking me, so it should be a fun time. So, who has a question for me first? Don't be shy.
Not in a sexual experience, but why does it feel like you're literally pooping after placing and removing an object from your butthole?
So, I don't know I know everybody listening knows that I'm not an expert, so I'm going to preface it by saying that I don't know the verbatim answer for that. But I feel like it has to do with the action of your sphincter, because the act of pooping is really just relaxing the sphincter, pushing, and the sphincter closing again. And so I feel like if you have something that you've placed into your anus and then you pull it out, it's replicating that same sphincter opening, closing action. That's my thoughts. That was a really good question, though.
So in a recent episode of Grey's Anatomy, there was an episode where Joe had a sexual encounter with somebody, and at the point of climax, the guy sang. Very embarrassingly, her name's Joe, so he was like, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, Joe. Anyways, that's a joke the coworker made. But anyways, how common is it for people to do that? And is a person weird if they point it out and get creeped out by it?
Oh, that's another really good question. I love you guys so much. So as far as singing during climax, I don't have any idea actual numbers for how common that is. I do know that a variety of things can happen during climax. There is an episode at the beginning of Californication where at climax, the girl punches David Duchovny in the face. There's a variety of different things in that genre. I don't think I have enough information to specifically say how often singing happens. That's not something I've ever heard brought up by anybody I've talked to. And I think as far as being, and this kind of goes with any sexual encounter that you have, consensual of course, is that when you're having this encounter, you're allowed to feel however you naturally feel. So if you're the receiving end of somebody singing during climax and you feel uncomfortable, it's absolutely okay to feel uncomfortable, just as it's absolutely okay for somebody to sing during their climax. That might be something that a partner would like a heads up on. I know if my partner did that, I would want a heads up on it, just so that I could, prepare for that. Because I don't want to, if somebody's in the bedroom with me, I don't want to shame them in the bedroom either. I'm going to have to look into that, though. That's going to definitely be featured on an episode of the podcast.
So how would you say a good reaction to that is in the moment?
We actually touch a little bit about this on one of our podcast episodes when I talk about how to react when somebody takes their pants off. Think if you're on the receiving end, the partner you're with climaxes and they start singing, I don't want to say no reaction is best. I would be reserved with my reaction. So if you find it shocking, I would refrain from laughing at them. They probably wouldn't like that very much. I would probably, honestly, I think my recommendation would be to treat it as any other climax. So if you're like pushing, you're thrusting, you're, doing whatever it is you're doing, and you would normally be like, oh yes, that feels good, and then the person busts out into song, like I think you should still carry on with how you would normally treat the like any other climax. But yeah, I would stay away from laughing. Okay, so pardon the sound change. I've had some technical difficulties, so we're going to pick up where we left off. And during the break, while I was trying to figure out what was going on with the mic, I thought a little bit more about kind of like the different things that people do during sex. And I recently read an article, probably maybe it's either like an Am I the Asshole on Reddit, or it could have been a New York Times advice column, I don't know. And I think woman's husband would say like goblin mode activated when they would have sex. And the first time she like thought it was cute, because you like are digging the person you're with and you're like, oh, that's a funny quirk. And then she came to hate it. For a first time, like a first time sexual interaction, I think it's one that you just got to roll with and kind of take it as it comes. And like it's perfectly acceptable to not find that attractive, or sexy at all. Like that's perfectly fine. You're not required to. But if you continue having sexual interactions with that person and it continues to be something that you're not a fan of, you should probably have a conversation with the person. Okay, so what else?
So another question I got would be like somebody who likes to have sex and enjoys the feeling, but does not like masturbation or does not find any appeal in that. How, like, is that a common thing too, like for women?
I have actually known a few people, men and women alike, who feel that way. And I think that one's kind of complicated because enjoying the feeling of sex can come from the act itself, like the act of penetration itself. It can come from just like the physical intimacy. A lot of people crave physical intimacy, and that's not something that you can necessarily get when you're masturbating or you're self-pleasuring. Sometimes it's just as much as like liking a warm body, and those things are not something that masturbation can provide. Touching yourself and having a partner touch you are also two completely different things, because while the end goal, might be an orgasm and it might be, it might feel good, the means to get there is very different. And it involves, a lot of body fluids and touching, and, that's not everybody's thing. Just like some people might like masturbating more than they like sexual encounters with other people. I think the same is true of the other way. And I will say I've seen a few numbers about masturbation. And if I'm remembering correctly, and I'll flash this on the screen if I'm not, that I think about 50% of women say that they masturbate or indulge in self-pleasure, whereas men, it's, I think, closer to 80%. And so something there, whether it's, societal, behavioral, something there is different. And, I can say personally, I don't like coming into contact with body fluids. And I think as a woman, that's much more likely to happen than it is as a man. It's harder to like skirt around that if you're doing self-pleasure. So that's my thoughts on that. I think that's probably pretty normal.
Like, I know I'm always like disgusted afterwards because it's gross. So is that pretty common? Like everybody pretty much thinks it's not like all like the movies make it. It's easy, clean up, nothing wrong afterwards. Like no, there's like wet spots and
I'm freaking
all
drenched.
like I feel gross and stuff like that. Like is that a common feeling for people?
Yeah, I think that's actually pretty common. And like I think it varies on like the type of body fluid, but like sex is just gross. Like, there's no way to get around
Like, it
it.
stinks, too.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's a smell associated with it. It's sweaty. There's body fluids. Anytime there's body fluids, there's bacteria. Bacteria produce odor. Even if you're not doing any kind of like butt play, you're still in that area. Which means there's bacteria, which means, it can smell like butt. Yeah, so it all just gets combined. So I think it's perfectly normal to just kind of be grossed out by that. I think there's both sides of it. Like, I feel like there is specifically a group of people who enjoy bodily fluids. That's their kink. They enjoy that. They enjoy playing with body fluids, whether that's when somebody's on their period or that's ejaculate, even so far as like water sports, playing with urine and things like that. And I think there's a group of people who kind of don't go one way or the other, but I'm absolutely positive that there's a group of people who are like, we have to put down a towel. We have our towel to clean this up. We're going to take the towel off. We're going to put it in the laundry right away. If the sheets get messed up, we're going to take the sheets off. And I think that's perfectly within, what's acceptable for sexual activity. Because honestly, like, it's the same as just like laying with a really sweaty person, like, except they're
sweaty person.
some of us, it's like, we don't care if we're like laying with somebody sweaty. And it, honestly, it could even go back to how we process sensory input. Because I know me personally, I do not like sticky stuff. I don't like feeling sticky. I don't like touching sticky. And so I think that's probably part of why I feel the way I do about some body fluids, is that I don't want to be sticky. So if it comes down to me being sticky or me washing my hands, I'm absolutely going to wash my hands.
You know how they talk about, like, okay, for sex, like, you have the before, like, to get you, like, turned up, like, that's, what is it, foreplay? Yeah. And then you have the during, but nobody really talks about, like, what happens after. Everybody's just like, what do you do?
So I think we could call that squarely Afterglow and pillow talk, which I absolutely love. And it varies between people, it varies between partners. I think depending on who you're with, you're going to have a different experience regardless. I've actually read some studies, and I can't remember if it's for both men and women. I do remember women because it affected me personally, that a certain group of women become energized post-coitus. After having an orgasm, they feel excited, and some women just want to go to sleep. I assume that's probably the same for men as well. I can only imagine if you have an opposite partner, which I think happens quite a bit, where somebody's like, yeah, let's go, and then the other person's like, no, I am absolutely spent, like, it is nap time. And like, I think that could be probably a little difficult to navigate. They always say, like, you want to make sure you pee after sex. That's to avoid, UTIs and things like that, particularly with the vagina, to, flush things out, get the pH balance back to normal. So when you engage in sexual activity, there are a lot of hormones that are being released. And so, that kind of like afterglow, laying in bed, cuddling kind of thing, like, that can definitely lead to bonding with your partner if you feel comfortable doing it, because I know we're just talking about like bodily fluids and things like that. And, if you're laying there and, you're just laying in a wet spot and you like, things are sticky and messy, maybe, in the event of female ejaculation, things are really wet, laying in a puddle might not be very fun. So that might be one of those things where you take it to clean up, you take a shower together, kind of bask in that afterglow in a different way. Some people, food is something that people enjoy a lot, that like, now I need a sandwich. It's really common. And so I think developing that with your partner is just as special as developing your sexual relationship with your partner. And honestly, I come from a place where I don't want to overstep my boundaries. So if I've engaged in sexual activity with somebody and it seems obvious to me that, like, it's time to go, I don't want to press it by staying there and just, like, awkwardly laying in their bed.
Right.
So I think that whichever side you're on, of if it's your house, if it's not your house, a good conversation to have at some point, whether it's leading up to it, during, after. Do you want me to stay? Is it okay if I go? Simple questions like that, and being willing to understand the answers and then adapt. So, if it's just a single encounter and that's going to be it, you're going to handle it differently than if it is, multiple encounters. So maybe the first encounter, your partner just like up and bolts, and that leaves you feeling, a little empty, a little less desired, used maybe. Those are just some examples, not necessarily things you should feel. But say you are feeling those things and you want to have this kind of relationship with this person again, it's probably worth mentioning, like, hey, I like a little more aftercare, when we're doing this kind of stuff. And they should respect that because, sex and sexual activities are two-way streets. So you want your partner to meet your needs. And so maybe, ideally for you, you want to lay there for an hour. And ideally for your partner doesn't want to lay there at all. So maybe you compromise and do like 30 minutes. Find a good middle ground. And honestly, if you have a partner who doesn't want to meet those needs in any way, then that means they're probably not a good partner, like, for you. I'm sure they're a good partner for somebody else, but they're probably not the best partner for you. I saw your interest peak when I mentioned water sports.
What are water sports?
Great question. So water sports are any sexual activity involving urine. So golden showers are kind of the classic water sports. I've heard it's really rare. I know somebody who's into it, but apparently person can urinate inside of another person when the penis is inside of them. But apparently it's hard to do, so it's not something that everybody does. And I think if you like water sports, that person is a gem when you find them.
So that ties it into the next question. Do you know, like statistically speaking, like, how many, like, people didn't actually know, like, the vagina has, like, more than one hole?
Oh boy. So I don't know accurate numbers for that. I do know that it's much higher than it should be. That's not divided. That's not a binary division either. That's not just men. Men and women alike don't realize that there are multiple holes down there. Don't realize what order they're in either. So for anybody listening, it goes urethra, vaginal opening, anus. The urethra is where you urinate from. It is a very small hole. The vaginal opening is, classically we call it the vagina. So the vaginal canal, which leads up to the uterus. And then, of course, your anus is where you poop from. Your poop chute. So I will look that up because I'm desperate to know. Awesome. So I think that about wraps it up. Thank you both so much for joining me. I had a great time. You guys had some amazing questions. And for anybody out there listening, you can join me on Learnin Stuff with Becky. Just send us an email to notyourmothersexedpod@gmail.com, or you can message us on social media. So Facebook, NYMSE, Not Your Mother's Sex Ed Podcast. Send us an email, send us a message, leave us a comment if you want. We would love to answer your questions. This is, a safe space, and Aunt Becky wants you to feel like you can ask anything that you need to ask. So thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.